Days before the dinner, Zara had reportedly been given a quiet piece of advice: accept the arrangement, avoid questions, and do not make the evening difficult. But instead of calming her, the warning confirmed her worst fear: the seat had never been chosen by accident. The message had not arrived as a command. Palace warnings rarely did. It came through careful language, delivered privately and wrapped in concern, as though someone were protecting Zara from embarrassment rather than preparing her for obedience. She was told that the evening carried unusual importance. Every senior family member was expected to appear united, calm, and completely supportive of the new order taking shape around the crown. There could be no hesitation, no visible disagreement, and certainly no incident that might attract whispers among the guests. Zara understood the meaning immediately. She was not being asked to enjoy the dinner. She was being asked to perform loyalty. At first, she considered saying nothing. She had spent years protecting her independence by remaining outside the most dangerous palace struggles. She held no official position that required her to compete for influence, and she had never needed a title to understand who she was. But then she learned that her usual place near Princess Anne had been changed. No clear explanation was offered. Her name had simply been moved across the table, closer to figures seen as personally loyal to Camilla. That detail transformed discomfort into suspicion. Zara's bond with Anne was not based on ceremony. It had been built through discipline, honesty, and years of refusing to let royal pressure define their relationship. Separating them publicly might appear harmless to an outsider. But within the palace, distance could carry a message. It could suggest that Anne's branch of the family was being repositioned, while Zara's new seat could be presented as proof that she accepted Camilla's growing authority without question. And that was the role Zara could not tolerate. She knew how quickly a photograph could become a declaration. One polite conversation could be described as reconciliation. One carefully arranged seat could be interpreted by diplomats, courtiers, and palace observers as an alliance. By sitting where Camilla had placed her, Zara would not merely be following protocol. She might be helping create a story she had never agreed to tell. Yet refusing carried its own danger. Cooperation would protect the evening and spare her family another scandal. Resistance could humiliate Charles, anger Camilla, and place Anne directly inside a conflict she had tried to avoid. Zara felt the weight of both choices, but the more she was encouraged not to question the arrangement, the clearer the answer became. William had also been informed that the table had changed. He noticed the shift, understood its possible meaning, and initially remained silent. Perhaps he hoped the tension would pass unnoticed. Perhaps he believed Zara would accept the seat for the sake of peace. But his silence depended on the conflict remaining private, and Zara was moving steadily toward a decision that would make that impossible. By the time Zara entered the room, she was no longer looking at a chair, she was looking at a decision about loyalty, dignity, and who had the authority to define her place. Royal tables are never random. Every guest is positioned to create a conversation, prevent a confrontation, or display an alliance. And as Zara studied the room, she began to understand the real purpose of Camilla's plan. The dinner was not seating the family, it was reorganizing it. Behind every royal place card was a calculation. Rank mattered, but rank was only the beginning. Personal loyalties, diplomatic value, old tensions, and the image the palace wanted to project all shaped the final arrangement. A seat could reward obedience. Distance could deliver a warning. And proximity to the center could make someone appear far more powerful than their formal role allowed. That was what troubled Zara most. The changes were not limited to her. Several guests closely associated with Anne and William had been pushed away from the most influential positions. They had not been removed or openly insulted. The palace was too careful for that. Instead, they had been shifted just far enough to weaken their presence, while figures known to support Camilla had been brought closer to the center of conversation. On paper, the table still looked balanced. In practice, it told a very different story. Camilla's allies appeared elevated. Anne's circle looked scattered. William's supporters seemed divided. And Zara's chair sat at the emotional heart of it all. Her presence beside Camilla's chosen guests would carry unusual weight because Zara was not an ordinary royal relative. She had royal blood without depending on palace employment. She was popular without carefully managing every public appearance. Her bluntness, independence, and informal manner gave her a credibility that official titles could not create. If she appeared comfortable inside Camilla's circle, the arrangement could be used as silent proof that Anne's side of the family had accepted the changing balance of power. That made Zara valuable. Camilla may have believed Zara's warmth could soften resistance to her authority. One friendly exchange, one relaxed smile, and one carefully positioned chair could suggest that old divisions had faded. But Zara had never agreed to become a symbol of reconciliation. She had not been consulted, and she refused to let her reputation be borrowed to support a message she did not believe. Across the room, William began studying the place cards. At first, his attention remained on Zara. Then, his expression changed. He noticed another altered position. Then another. Catherine's supporters had been separated from one another, while Camilla's preferred guests occupied places where they could dominate the evening's most important conversations. This was no isolated adjustment. It was a structure. Guests slowly became aware that William was no longer preparing to sit. He moved his attention from name to name, tracing the invisible lines of influence across the table. The quiet delay began to feel dangerous. Zara's refusal had exposed the first crack, but William could now see that simply moving her would leave everything else untouched. The chair was not the problem. It was the foundation upon which the entire message had been built. And once William understood that Zara's seat was only one piece of a larger design, he knew that moving a single chair would expose the conflict without removing its cause. No announcement was made. Zara did not raise her voice or accuse anyone. She simply looked at the place card, stepped away from the chair, and refused to sit. Yet, in a room governed by unspoken obedience, that small movement sounded louder than any public argument. Around her, the final guests were taking their places. Chairs moved, polite conversations softened, and the carefully controlled rhythm of the evening seemed ready to begin. But Zara remained standing beside the seat Camilla had chosen for her. She did not look confused. She did not appear uncertain. Her stillness carried the unmistakable weight of a decision already made. A senior aide noticed first. He approached with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to correcting problems before they became visible. His voice remained low, his expression calm, as though the matter could still be dismissed as a misunderstanding. He indicated the chair and gently reminded Zara that the seating arrangement had been approved. Zara did not argue. She simply said the seat was not appropriate. The words were controlled, almost polite, but that restraint made them far more powerful. She offered no emotional explanation that could be challenged, no accusation that could be denied, no angry outburst that could later be used against her. By refusing to defend herself, Zara denied the palace its easiest escape. No one could dismiss her as difficult or impulsive. She had drawn a line, and she had done it without giving anyone permission to move it. Nearby conversations began to disappear. One by one, guests realized that the dinner could not properly begin while Zara remained standing. The silence spread slowly, carrying the tension farther than any raised voice could have done. What had been intended as a private arrangement was now becoming a public test of authority. Camilla noticed the delay and immediately understood the cause. Her attention moved toward Zara, then to the disputed chair. For a brief moment, neither woman spoke. Yet the silence between them carried years of caution, suspicion, and unresolved struggle. Camilla had expected compliance. Zara had chosen dignity. Anne watched from her own place, outwardly composed. She did not step forward, nor did she urge her daughter to sit. Her refusal to interfere was itself a statement. Zara would not be pressured into submission simply to protect the comfort of the room. Charles, however, still appeared to believe protocol would restore control. He looked toward the aide, expecting him to resolve the problem quietly. The institution had survived countless awkward moments through patience, rank, and obedience. Surely this would be no different. But before the aide could speak again, William rose. The movement changed everything. He did not ask Zara to reconsider. He did not instruct her to accept the arrangement for the sake of peace. Instead, he reached toward the table and removed the first-place card. But William's intervention was more dangerous than Zara's refusal, because the moment he touched that place card, he challenged not only Camilla's decision, but the authority behind the entire arrangement. William did not confront Camilla. He did something far more unsettling. Without raising his voice, he began moving the place cards one by one, forcing senior royals, advisors, and guests to watch as Camilla's carefully constructed order was quietly taken apart. His first decision was immediate. Zara's card was moved closer to Anne, restoring the connection that had been broken before the evening even began. It seemed simple, almost natural, but the change created a fresh complication. At a royal dinner, one person could not be moved without affecting everyone around them. Each position was tied to precedence, security, diplomatic courtesy, and the invisible hierarchy that shaped every formal gathering. William understood that. He also understood that stopping after one change would make Zara look like the problem, so he asked for the full seating chart. An aide hesitated, then handed it to him. William studied the arrangement with the calm focus of someone no longer reacting to an awkward moment, but correcting a larger design. He traced the table carefully, noticing how influence had been concentrated in some places and weakened in others. Then he began again. One guest was shifted to preserve rank. Another was moved to restore diplomatic balance. Catherine's place was brought closer to William, while several of Camilla's preferred allies lost the prominent positions that had placed them at the center of the evening's most important conversations. With each adjustment, the original structure weakened. William remained courteous throughout. His voice never sharpened. He did not accuse Camilla of manipulation, and he did not claim authority in dramatic terms. That restraint made his actions harder to challenge. An argument could have been dismissed as anger. This was something else. It was controlled defiance, carried out so calmly that no one could openly call it rebellion without exposing the conflict themselves. Camilla finally intervened. She reminded William that the arrangement had already been approved. The words were measured, but the warning behind them was unmistakable. Approval meant authority. Approval meant the matter was closed. William looked at the chart and replied that an approved plan could still be wrong. The sentence was simple. Its consequences were not. Charles remained silent. He could have ordered the original arrangement restored, but doing so would have forced Zara back into the disputed seat and made the power struggle impossible to hide. Overruling William in front of the guests would not protect the evening. It would confirm that the dinner had become a contest between the king's wife and his heir. Only when the wider table had been rearranged did Zara finally sit. Her decision made the truth clear. She had not demanded a better position for herself. She had resisted the message behind the original plan. Across the table, Camilla's expression remained composed, but the calm was becoming a mask. William had taken control without asking permission, and he had done it before witnesses who would remember every second. The dinner could now begin, but the balance inside the room had changed, and Camilla knew that William had done more than rescue Zara. He had exposed the limits of her influence. Camilla smiled through the dinner, spoke to every guest, and behaved as though nothing unusual had happened. But behind that controlled expression was a decision already forming. William's intervention could not go unanswered, and Zara's defiance could not be allowed to become a precedent. The meal continued beneath a layer of strained politeness. Conversations restarted, glasses were lifted, and every guest understood that the safest choice was to behave as though the table had always been arranged this way. No one mentioned the place cards. No one referred to Zara's refusal. But the silence around the incident only made it more powerful. Camilla performed calmness with remarkable discipline. She laughed at the appropriate moments, welcomed each conversation, and gave no public sign that control had slipped from her hands. To acknowledge the confrontation would be to admit that William had challenged her successfully. So she protected her authority the only way she could, by pretending it had never been threatened. Yet behind the scenes, questions were already being asked. Aides were quietly instructed to discover who had warned Zara about the original arrangement and whether Anne had encouraged her resistance. Camilla needed to know if the refusal had been spontaneous or planned. One act of defiance could be contained. A coordinated challenge from Anne's side of the family would be far more dangerous. Her concern was not simply personal anger. If Zara faced no consequence, others might begin questioning ceremonial decisions too. A changed seat today could become a refused procession tomorrow. The palace depended on the belief that approved arrangements were obeyed, even when they carried hidden messages. William understood that the conflict had not ended. Throughout the dinner, he remained close to Zara and Anne, making it impossible to isolate either woman without involving him. His presence became a shield, quiet but unmistakable. After the guests departed, the calm finally broke. Camilla demanded reassurance that future arrangements would be respected. Zara refused to apologize. She insisted that she had not rejected rank or insulted the crown. She had rejected being positioned as a symbol of loyalty she had never agreed to offer. Camilla framed the refusal differently. To her, the issue was no longer one chair. It was obedience. Public order could not survive if every family member decided which rules deserved respect. Anne stepped in before the accusation could harden. She defended Zara's right not to be used as evidence that old tensions had disappeared. Unity, Anne argued, could not be manufactured through place cards and then presented as truth. Charles tried to calm the room, but his caution only exposed the divide. He asked for restraint from everyone while avoiding any direct criticism of Camilla's original plan. Then, William accepted full responsibility for rearranging the table. He would not allow Zara to stand alone as the source of the crisis. Camilla's final warning was cold. Family loyalty could not survive if everyone began rewriting the rules for themselves. Yet Camilla's warning only deepened the crisis, because William was beginning to question who had rewritten those rules first and how many other decisions had been disguised as tradition. What began as a disagreement over one chair was now exposing a far more dangerous struggle. The real conflict was not between Zara and Camilla. It was between two visions of the monarchy, one built on control from the present and another preparing for the future. William's decision to rearrange the table marked a turning point. Until that evening, his frustrations had remained private, expressed through silence, hesitation, and carefully controlled disagreements behind closed doors. But by removing the place cards in front of witnesses, he had crossed into active resistance. He was no longer merely questioning decisions he believed were damaging the family. He was openly correcting them. For Camilla, that challenge threatened the discipline on which royal authority depended. She believed the monarchy survived through structure, coordination, and the appearance of absolute unity. Every entrance, procession, seat, and public exchange had to serve the institution. Personal discomfort could not be allowed to disrupt the message. Once one person rejected an approved arrangement, the entire system risked becoming negotiable. William saw the danger differently. To him, unity achieved through pressure was not unity at all. Loyalty could not be forced through isolation, quiet humiliation, or symbolic displays designed without consent. A family might obey such methods for a time, but beneath the polished surface, resentment would grow, and eventually, one small act of resistance would expose everything. Zara had become that act. She had never shown much interest in competing for titles or ceremonial power. That independence made her an unlikely figure at the center of a royal conflict. Yet it also made her difficult to control. She could recognize the emotional cost of palace politics without needing anything from the palace in return. Her refusal gave voice to tensions others had accepted in silence. Anne understood the consequences immediately. In private, she warned William that challenging one decision would not end with one dinner. If he continued correcting individual choices, he would eventually be forced to confront the system that authorized them. That system reached far beyond seating plans. Future ceremonies, inheritance discussions, family access, royal residences, treasured jewels, and the influence granted to different branches of the family could all become part of the same struggle. The table may have been an early attempt to establish Camilla's position before the next transfer of power, defining who stood near the center and who was expected to remain at the edge. William now realized that small ceremonial choices could shape how the public later understood legitimacy and succession. Catherine supported his intervention, but she feared that Camilla would begin treating Zara and Anne not as relatives with concerns, but as organized opposition. Charles was trapped between them. Defending Camilla risked widening the divide with his heir. Supporting William would mean admitting the original arrangement had carried a deeper purpose. Meanwhile, the story was already escaping. Aides were discussing it. Guests were repeating it. Household staff had noticed far more than the palace wanted acknowledged. And as whispers moved beyond the dining room, the palace faced a new danger. The public might soon discover that one refused seat had revealed a royal family already choosing sides. By morning, the chairs had been removed, the place cards collected, and the official photographs showed nothing unusual. But the people who had witnessed the dinner understood the truth. Zara's refusal had changed more than the table, and William's quiet response had drawn a line no one could erase. Inside the palace, the effort to contain the story began immediately. Aides described the changes as a last-minute practical adjustment, the kind of harmless alteration that could happen at any major event. There had been no dispute, they suggested, no challenge, no fracture in royal authority. But those explanations only worked for people who had not been inside the room. The guests remembered something very different. They remembered Zara standing while everyone else sat. They remembered the silence, Camilla's controlled expression, and William moving each place card with deliberate calm. quiet conversations began spreading beyond the dinner, carrying details the palace could not officially deny without giving the incident even greater importance. For Zara, the morning brought relief mixed with unease. She had refused to surrender her dignity, but she understood the possible cost. Future invitations could become less frequent. Access might quietly narrow. Her place at important gatherings could be reconsidered under the language of protocol rather than punishment. Anne stood firmly behind her daughter, yet her support came with a warning. The palace rarely forgot resistance, especially when that resistance had been witnessed. Consequences did not always arrive through public confrontation. Sometimes they appeared months later, hidden inside a guest list, a procession order, or a door that no longer opened. William faced his own reckoning. Charles questioned why he had changed the entire table instead of handling Zara's objection quietly. To the king, the scale of William's response had transformed an uncomfortable moment into a challenge to authority. But William refused to accept that argument. The conflict had already been made public the moment Zara was placed in an impossible position before the assembled guests. Asking her to obey would not have protected the family. It would only have protected the people who created the arrangement. Camilla, meanwhile, began examining future plans with greater care. Guest lists, ceremonial roles, and seating arrangements could no longer be treated as routine details. They had become tools in a deeper struggle over influence. Catherine understood the danger. From that point forward, every dinner, procession, and gathering could become another silent test of loyalty. Zara had never wanted to lead a rebellion. She had not entered the room seeking power, yet her refusal had turned her into a symbol for family members who felt increasingly managed, positioned, and used. Charles spoke of restoring unity, but he avoided the question at the center of the conflict. Who had authorized the symbolic isolation of Anne's family? And why? William now understood that Camilla would never again see him only as the heir. By dismantling her arrangement, he had revealed himself as a rival center of authority, one capable of challenging the present while preparing for the future. The chairs were gone, but the battle they exposed remained. And the next confrontation might not involve a place card or a table, but something far more valuable: access, inheritance, royal jewels, and the future shape of the crown.